I'm Dazza Greenwood here at the Human Dynamics Lab of the MIT Media Lab, and we are very happy to have a friend and colleague, and I'd say like a good example of an innovator, Manu Sporny, with us today. We happen to be in town for rebooting Web of Trust, and was kind and gracious enough to come by and hold open discussion meeting to give us a bit of a bit of an update and overview of what's happening with standards in the blockchain world. Right, so welcome, and if you want to kick this off with maybe introduce yourself with a few remarks, and then you can open up the discussion.
Sure, happy to. My name's Manu. I primarily work with standardization bodies to build kind of the next generation internet and the web, primarily around payments, identity, and blockchain. So those are the primary focuses. I have multiple companies that I've started, each in different industry verticals, education, payments. And the thing that's kind of the common thing that ties all of those organizations together is that they're all built on open standards. So we do proprietary software, but we ensure that the proprietary bits are built on top of a common substrate, because fundamentally we want to make sure that all of that technology is as global as possible. The fundamental mission that we're trying to achieve with multiple organizations is ensuring that globally people have an identity that they can control, and data that they can control, like it's under their purview. And we want to make sure that once they have that identity that they can control, that they are economically empowered to transact with any other human being on the planet without having to go through middlemen, without having to, so connecting more directly, both on a human identity level and a payments, an economic level. So basically, I guess today's discussion, I'm just going to try to give a brief overview of the stuff that's going on in the standard space, the international standard space around this, and then hopefully open it up to discussion. So quick 10 minutes, and then the rest of it, hopefully discussion. But before I start, any questions? Hopefully y'all know Christopher Allen. This is the co-editor of the TLS specification, right? And also runs a set of workshops called Rebooting Web of Trust, which are fantastic, right? So when you're building global technologies, you need a space to incubate it. You need to get together the world's brightest minds. Christopher does that with aplomb. Like we have some of the most fantastic security researchers, privacy researchers, law folks coming together and providing input to build these things that we hope are eventually going to become international standards. Any questions? Like before I begin, like what do folks want to focus on? I mean, we can, if no one's interested in the payment aspects, we can jump into the identity aspects. If people are less interested in the identity stuff, we can jump into payments. Any particular focus that folks want?
I think that I mean, for me, I am interested in the intersection. So like where, where are the Web Payments Working Group basically relying on identity, and where are the kind of the edges where you might apply improvements?
Yep, we can definitely do that. Yeah, and that's really where this stuff gets interesting, right? It's where when you start coupling identity with payments to ensure that people can actually transact in ways that we'll definitely go over that.
I might add one thing, which is if when you're talking, you could give a sense, especially for people that are interested in this but aren't already expert and don't know much, about like the landscape, the landscape scan of standards and the, I guess, the big moving pieces, the big features on the landscape for this.
Okay. So, I mean, maybe the best place to start for that would be the standardization bodies, right? The standardization bodies are usually the last step, but if you want to do anything global, you almost have to work with them, right? Or you have to work through them, right? They're not. Don't look at standards bodies as a single individual, body or corporation. They're usually a collection of hundreds of different companies that each have their own motives. Many of them have profit motives, and you have to figure out how to navigate that landscape to get things through. Uncorrupted, right? Corruption, they can be corrupted either way. They can be corrupted academically, they can be corrupted politically, they can be corrupted financially. Aware of how kind of the human component of it, right? How these standards go through the standards process is really important. So if we're talking about the internet and the if it's internet lower level protocol stuff, it's the Internet Engineering Task Force. So these folks the ITF where they work on so they do the plumbing on low level right. The World Wide Web Consortium, there are two those major browsers, everything of them, and those what kind of standards are built at W3C. But I think that's very much just a cross-cutting subset of what things that have like the web that more started in the early 2000s. Until it was published by Google Search Crawler. Now Google, when it goes out and crawls sites, it actually picks out
also things like VRML and sort of newer interface ways to approach
their stuff. So if W3C, ITF is plumbing, W3C deals with user interface style. Rough breakout HTTP protocol 3C before it moved to ITF. Do any in their consensus, they try to operate on consensus that have created these standards.
We should also send
Why? No, I mean mob rule stuff. You're sure that it's not just commercial. Say driving the web, you want to make sure you want the community to kind of recognize that, right? So consensus, rough consensus. It doesn't mean everyone agrees. Like consensus doesn't mean you have 100% agreement. It means that you're picking the thing that has the least amount of objection. It's the thing that everyone has kind of sort of found a compromise on. and can move forward on. There is, yes, that's another excellent point. The big amount of discussion around whether or not the intellectual property be owned by the companies that created it, and they made a fairly radical. In IETF, I forget when this happened at IETF, but there's basically a patent policy. Anything that's created on the internet and the web is supposed to be given away, patent-free, royalty-free. Anyone can implement, no permission, right? So anyone can innovate, and that really has led to an explosion in the way that we innovate. So we tend to innovate at the edges as a result of that. If that was not in place, you would have to talk to companies like IBM to get permission from them to build stuff on top of the web. The web would not exist in the way that it exists today as a result. So fundamentally, like that's kind of the lay of the land, right? There are two major standard-setting bodies. They have 460 member companies at W3C. We try to operate by consensus, which means that when technologies are being built, it's a conversation. Try to pick the thing that works, the thing that works for most of the folks. And it's a 4 to 6 year process. That makes sense. Is that helpful to kind of give a? So at this point, I mean, I can jump into some of the work items that W3C is working around payment identity. There are 56 active working groups. A variety of different groups. You're seeing a very small sliver of the work that they're doing. To give you examples of other work that's gone through W3C, XML was created and standardized at W3C. Early versions of HTML and HTML5 eventually became standardized at W3C. WebRTC, the thing that we're using to record this video and do the screencasting, standardized at W3C. There's a ton of, if you're using a browser, the vast majority of that technology, sharing the microphone, sharing the video camera, all was standardized at W3C. What a community of us are trying to achieve is enabling people globally have an identity that they own, right? It can't be taken away from by their company. It can't be taken away from by their government. It's something that they have. It's theirs, and it's provable that it's theirs. Mathematically, cryptographically provable that it's theirs. And then if we get this good identity substrate where people can trust each other at a distance in place, the next stage is to try and ensure that they can engage economically. Like, could you in the future collaborate with someone on the other side of the planet to launch a company without ever having the face, right? You look at the credentials, you look at if they choose to share that with you, you look at it, you say, this seems like they've done amazing things. I'd like to work with them. You engage in some kind of digital contract with them or a set of digital contracts with them. You figure out how to share the ownership between the organizations, and then as payments flow into the organization, they naturally flow to each one, right? We're trying to get people to trust each other to the point that these sorts of economic transactions are easier than they are today. At a distance, but that's well into the future, right? That's how do we actually make that happen? So I'm gonna, break at this point. Go ahead.
Oh, I literally just switched the camera that was your screen.
Okay.
That's how we do it. Wow.
So what do you want to see first? The payment stuff or the identity stuff? Is there any
identity?
All right. And I guess that's a good place to start because that's kind of the base layer. You can't have meaningful economic transactions. I'm happy to send $5 to the other side of the planet without really knowing who the person is, but sending $10,000 is a completely different story, right? Okay. So I'm going to walk through a demo. Let me give a bit of context here. So this is what we're calling, this is kind of the, what's loosely called the verifiable payments ecosystem. Right? You can look at it as kind of sort of an identity ecosystem. And there are three main actors, the ones across the top of the three main actors. We have issuers that issue digital credentials. So think of a digital credential like a digital driver's license, digital passport, proof of age, proof that you work at this particular employer, proof that you have a training in a particular profession. Those are all digital credentials. There are many different types of issuers of those credentials. Department of Motor Vehicles issues driver's licenses. Governments tend to issue passports. Employers issue
an important distinction is that they're not identities. Credentials associated with your identity.
Exactly right. So these are attributes, right, that are tied to the identifier that you own. Identifier, decentralized identifier. So issuers, you know, I listed a number of organizations and, you know, officially recognized things, but people can issue their own credentials. So, you know, if since I know Dazza, I can say I know him. I am the issuer of that credential, right? I'm the only one that can say I know him with right? So this is a mutual relationship. We've both acknowledged that we know each other, right? Versus, I know a certain celebrity, right? No, they probably don't know you, but so that's, you know, one-way relationship. So issuers issue digital credentials. Can hold on to certain types of credentials. They store them in particular locations like digital wallets, phones. Agency asks you for is your driver's license. They want to know that you can operate a motor vehicle before they give one of those things over to you. They may also ask you for proof of insurance and a variety of phone numbers so that they can contact you, a variety of other things like that. These three actors kind of constitute the ecosystem. Issuers issue credentials to holders. That's us. We hold on to them. Verifiers ask us for those credentials, and it is our choice on whether or not we want to share them or not. Maybe we want to share it. Maybe you're oversharing when you give them the driver's license. All they want to know is that you're properly licensed to touch. Your height, your eye color, any of your birthday, any of those things. They do want to know that you're above a certain age, because that's a loose indicator of whether or not you're going to drive at 125 miles an hour or stay under the speed limit, right? So there's a certain amount of data that's being shared in this ecosystem. The thing at the bottom is the identifier screen, right? So that's a type of identifier. We may be on Twitter. That's another. Corporations do, governments do, things like that. All types of different identifiers. All of us have a centralized. It might be an employee-issued identifier, or it might be decentralized, like a decentralized identifier. So the thing that the issuer asks you when they start attaching attributes to it, that thing that they create, the attachment of this up here. So that works. Decentralized identifiers tend to be pretty new. Blockchain, right? The graphically provable thing. Different blockchains. Some blockchains have their own mechanism, or usually each blockchain has its own a decentralized identifier. So a decentralized identifier is built on top of the Bitcoin block. Identifiers, each one of them have slightly different benefits and drawbacks, and ultimately that's a good thing, because that this stuff into production. It is going to happen in the next couple of years, and it is already possible to create these decentralized identifiers today. But as far as so that's a very hard. The good news is that the rebooting over trust community has had for many years, and even before that, the Internet Identity Workshop has been having that come from, and there's no single answer. 100. It's very string and it's very contextual, but the over it has come out. The answer is it said, look, and the reboot it's really how I track you and how you track me, and decent bit of consensus around that.
There's a process. There's a step-by-step nature of it, but we want to be careful about that. We're just simply saying there is a process of how I keep track of you, and that you can model and you can use computers.
Which is when you put this stuff together, verified, it's one thing. How do you define identity?
We say, what's the use case? What problem are you trying to solve? We have we don't get into that we can use to address that problem, and let's see what the proper tooling is to address the problem.
Terrific answer. So with respect to digital systems, there's a working concept of those blocking that when identifies by which one is tracked with what you say.
Right.
After with your totally unsatisfactory, technically accurate.
Right.
My question then is a little
attributes about it. So I think there's pretty strong pushback on that. The level of access. So let's identify each other, right? When we know you, you didn't know me. So our first contact. And then we start talking, and you know, you reveal that, you know, you're at the blockchain, you know, want each other. So now just information about each other, and in at least in my mind, in both of our minds, we can more easily track one another. Right? I think it's more about you, about who you are, or at least what you might not. I think you might not be interested in blockchain. Right? My understanding of you would, if I found out some information about you from outside. I don't. So again, it turns into perception of my. So again, this is your process change, evolve.
That definitely process, and definitely not the essence of you and new,
Right?
But more like a digital pound in a very boring commercial. Enough way from the past,
Right.
Not such.
Right.
Things that are going on. Different question. Continue. And so, could you just identify like then reader that established.
Let me preface this like no perfect.
Just one final thing. Wanted you to keep your
We have multiple things, so I'm going to feed off of the last discussion. Minutes is an identity. We tend to use language. Of persona, right? It's a narrow sliver of the person, you know, who the person is. It's about a plain set of things. It's not any more complex than that from a technical perspective. So, Credential is a bundle of claims. And it's wrapped.
You can collect all kinds of information about you, and you can collect all kinds of information about you. But the moment that, you know, he looks at your MIT business card. That's a very different situation, because now MIT is sending then you are the asset. Now you're looking at the business card, and was there sufficient effort in it? Was it embossed? It looks unfinished, or is it new?
Stuff
So that's
we should be called verifiable credentials.
real kind of
We have things that can be stuff that you say about yourself, or tend to be things that others can't prove, right? Especially ones that have authority. So people says that I can't. So did that answer your
Very much
question?
so.
Okay.
And I didn't know about this
You know, are the Department of
verified thing, so it was actually carry on.
There's a please go ahead.
I was just wondering, do you think that governments are going to change the way that they do identity? Because Dazza mentioned how initially it was seen as a snapshot. As
I think so. It's inevitable that they're going to have. And it exposed people's identity in a very fundamental, I don't want to say identity, certain things about them in a fundamental way that would allow somebody else to say, oh, I'm that person as well. And they Equifax. The Estonian resident changers on the advisory board is a initiative that the Estonian government's spearheading to give people to kind of show. So residency card I have. This is a Estonian e-resident. Right, so I residency card. Digital key signing. Yeah, if you steal that from me, you can't become me because I'm the only one that card, right? So what Estonia is doing. No, in order to grow economically, they have to bring on their countries to make it. And the only way for them established presence in their country. So the Estonian e-residency card, that I got that card without ever stepping in Estonia. I didn't need to go to an embassy in the U.S. and do something. If I did that, I could open a bank account in Estonia, right, without stepping foot in the country. Try to do a wet signature. So using that card, you file your taxes in 5 minutes. Most Estonian taxes, I think 40%, I want to say this, 40% of Estonian taxes are filed within the first 18 hours of the entire country because you stick the card in, you say, I allow access to my bank account, do the auto calculation, and go. Granted, that would never fly in the U.S. The U.S. is never going to go there, but Estonia has, and it's working out fairly well for them. Legislation is digitally signed. The people that are in charge of this program, I was amazed that I did fly over to Estonia and sat down with the government officials there, and the people that came and sat at the table were no older than 30 years old, 32, 33 max. Right? These are the people that are writing the legislation. They got legislation passed within 8 months. So this is an example of governments really taking an initiative in pushing. Thank you. Really pushing the initiative forward. The U.S. is actually backing research into a lot of this work as well. Governments are issuing grants and research grants to look into this stuff. So and it's beneficial.
I also want to add another thing, and this is a difference in different countries, but you know, in the EU, there's a lot of rights around dignity, and so there's things like the right to be forgotten. Remember, we said identity is a process, which means that this isn't you. You are have a continuum, and some of that continuum might be that some of this information should not be held against you or for you or whatever in the future. And that's a very dynamic thing, and so we have it, and it's very dynamic.
Yeah. So did that answer your question? Okay, so hopefully conceptually this makes sense. Is this fairly hopefully it's a fairly simple, straightforward concept. If it's not, it's going to fail, right? Okay, so what we can do at this point is kind of show you what this looks like in let me find. Okay, so let's go back to how you actually execute on this vision, right? International standards around it. You want multiple organizations implementing and pushing forward on the vision, right? But it ends up becoming codified in code at some point, right? You need to reach everyone in the world, and in order to reach everyone in the world, you need to use the plumbing that already exists. Most people, actually I shouldn't say most people, there are a very large amount of people have smartphones, mobile phones, and access to the web and the internet today. I think the last number was like 3.6 billion people have access to the web, and around 3 billion of those people have access to smartphones and can access the web via smartphones. So these are the types of standards that we work on in W3C. So this is called the credential handler. I'm at a digital wallet site right now, and this digital wallet site is asking me if they can handle credentials on my behalf. I'm going to install them as a handler for this. Actually, let me go ahead and yeah. Let me can folks see in the back? Let me see if I can. Okay. Okay, there we go. So this site is basically saying, hey, I would like to handle credentials on your behalf. Can I do that? And again, you can have multiple of these sites. You can have one for your personal life, and you can choose a different provider for your business life. And you got a different provider for something else. So I'm going to install the credential handler. It says, this site wants to manage your credentials. Do you want to block them? This is the same process you go through to like share your microphone or your video camera. So I'm going to say, yes, I want to allow them. Okay, so that's it. I have a digital wallet now, right? Easy one-click process. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to get a credential. And the credential I'm going to get is, I want to fly to another country. I need a digital passport. So I'm going to log in, and this is using a decentralized identifier to log in. One of the side effects of this work, it's not the main goal of the work, but a side effect is you can actually do universal login with these decentralized identifiers. So I'm going to click login. It's going to say, hey, we're using the word identity in a very loose fashion here, but which identity do you want to use? Your social identity, your business identity, your personal identity?
Yep.
Sorry.
Thanks. I was just getting a migration going.
Okay.
So we're on a roll.
Sure.
Can I make a special request?
Sure.
Could we pause and go a little bit after 12 and just go into a workshop room
Sure.
just around the corner?
Sure.
That is okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would just unplug that and just pick the laptop out. And TMA.
Yeah, I guess we should probably wrap up soon.
Yep, maybe 12:15 or 12:10.
Yeah, I'll try to run through real quick. It's full. Here. There we go. Oh, sure. That's important. Take that.
Well,
Thank you.
this is on the fly. Amazing. So it goes actually straight.
Straight.
There we go.
Okay, that would be awesome.
Back there. This is the new product.
Yeah, must be them.
Sorry. This is not good.
There we go. Go. So basically, oh well, why don't you? This is the issue. Saying, hey, which identity do you want to do? I said issue it to my personal network. Thinking. Hold on 1 second. I think I lost it. So let me try this again. Okay. So I click login, I say I want to start my social identity. I log in, it has my decentralized identifier, which means now it has an identifier to associate a bunch of attributes with. I say, please give me my passport. I want to store it in my social identity. It sends me back to my digital wallet site. My digital wallet says, do you want to store this here? I say, of course I do. I want that passport. And now I'm going to go and I'm going to book a flight to another country. Right? And somewhere during the process, they say, we would like your digital passport. And notice that it's not asking me to log in. It's just saying, provide your passport. I click provide passport and my social identity. Again, the wallet says, are you sure you want to send this over? There's a bunch of personally identifiable information there. I say, yes, I do. Send it. They get and then that's it. Like that's the whole process. And it's making 2.8 billion browsers today. So the browser manufacturers don't need to implement any of this stuff for it to work. It would be more secure if they implemented it, but there you go. The other part of this is, okay, so we've talked about how to establish an identity. How do we actually use that identity to do, and this is the intersection, right? How do we use it to transact? So this is the payment handler demo. So we're switching gears away from identity to payments. The web payments work at W3C right now is highly focused on how do we make credit card transactions easier on the web? Or rather, how do we reduce abandonment, right? So it's not the full vision of how do we enable people to engage, but it's a baby step.
And not lose.
And not, well, yeah, and not lose security, but the security is pretty terrible in version 1 of the spec. It transmits credit card numbers in clear. So it's arguably worse than what we have right now because it's a one-click transmission of information. So you can say, hey, I've been in a position where I'm halfway through typing my credit card number and I'm like, oh, actually, I don't actually want to give that information. This kind of takes that away. The very next step is how do we do tokenized cards? How do we do encrypted cards and make that a safer process?
Quick question. There's a few very heavyweight standard in the for tokenization in the transaction batches with the credit card.
Yeah, it's the EMV code.
The EMV code, and then all the specs in there. Have you ever tried to implement that? Oh my God. So, but anyway, what's the relationship between that and this, and the type of tokenization you would do? Any?
It's a very political discussion, right? So the short of it is, everyone's trying to work together, but there are certain economic incentives that are in place to not work together. And even at the standards body layer, right? So EMV code stands for Your Pay MasterCard Visa, right? So those are the organizations that set it up, and they have certain things that they want to see in the world, right? That are not aligned with, for example, things like coin theory, things of that nature. Anyway, so it's a political. It's a very political. Something good will realize. Get bigger, so you can see. And then I start adding credit cards, right? So here's my Visa card. There we go. And let's add a MasterCard. And that's another MasterCard. Let me try and create another one. Here's my American Express card, right? So my digital wallet now contains these 3 payment instruments. And what the web payment stuff is supposed to do is enable new types of payment networks to be launched. So I should be able to add a Bitcoin wallet and Ethereum wallet in here. If there's a local payment network like an M-Pesa thing, I should be able to add that payment instrument in here as well. And then when I go to a site, when you're at a site, you have to log in, or you have to, there's this big form that you have to fill out with credit card expiration date. But instead of doing all that, all I have to do here, using the web payment stuff, is when I click the buy button, I select which payment instrument I want to use. So for this one, I'm going to use my Amex card. I click pay. My digital wallet says, hey, this site's requesting payment from you. Are you sure you want to pay them? Yes, I confirm. Done. At no point did I have to enter anything in. It's just a quick, easy payment. Okay.
Outstanding.
So those two technologies together, yeah, please.
So with a system as simple as this is, how do you see it changing the way we monetize content? Because currently we use advertising to monetize it. And you see it as potentially, I go to a website and see an article and go, I read the first version, I'm going to pay 5 cents for the rest of it.
So people, there are a number of companies that are working on micropayments for this. I'm not going to say that that's the future, because micropayments have been tried time and time again. There's a place for advertising. People want some stuff for free, and they will never pay for it. But enabling easier ways to set up channels, payment channels, where you are doing micropayments is possible, right? So this you could look at this as kind of like a payment channel setup. Mechanism.
How do you trust the site that's storing the code?
So who knows, right? I mean, maybe the site you're using. How would I do? I would choose a trusted provider, right? And fundamentally, I would only store tokenized cards in the thing. So even if somebody broke in, they really wouldn't. They would get a tokenized version of my card. People will pick, like people trust Amazon to store their credit card details. People trust Stripe. They're going to be those sorts of providers in the market that do it. And frankly, people trust a website that was just slapped together over a weekend and store all their credit card details in clear text in a flat file on the web server. So, this will hopefully be better for that, but the same things apply, the same ways that you.
So this gentleman is actually becoming chair of Massachusetts Legal Hackers, and so I hope that you're listening to this with like, where's the hack? What wants to be innovated?
Yeah.
What needs to be built next that is somewhat regulatory? Could possibly federally chartered credit union be a trust? You say trusted, and then you break it up. People don't always trust. Secure systems. Could they be a trustworthy provider of a service?
Absolutely. So as much as people rag on banks and not that many people rag on credit unions, right, exactly. So they could not only be the keepers of your cards and payment instruments, but your identity, data as well, right? This is a new business model for banks and financial services organizations.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea. The unfortunate thing is, for whatever reason, they're not engaging. They have plenty of opportunity to engage. You've told them multiple times about it. Please come in, engage. Please don't be disrupted, because it would be a bad thing for the financial system to consolidate to 1 or 2 or 3 technology companies. I should mention that Google, Microsoft, and Apple are all at the table participating.
Make it free.
Right. So here's an opportunity to innovate and provide new services to your customers, and silence is most of what we can do. The only banks and financial institutions that have participated in any significant way are the ones that have been regulated in the European Union. So we've got banks in Europe very interested in it, listening and saying they're interested in putting it, but it's because exactly, and it's primarily due to, it's GDPR, it's PSD2. They have tons of market pressure on them, or actually regulatory pressure on them.
They ask if there were a let us say incentive that was like aligned to a small financial institution, fiduciary that would be represent real value or really great alignment with what they're doing, and be a good fit and be ready? What are the sorts of ways in which providing this kind of capability as a service to their members and their account holders? What's your best thinking now, or ideas you've heard for the sorts of services and products and offerings that could make sense?
The easiest thing that most customers will probably get is a digital wallet, right? Well, provide a digital wallet to your customers. They can store their payment instruments in there. They can store their identity, active information there. People trust banks and financial institutions to hold that data on their behalf, so you don't really have to do any kind of use around that. And it's simple, right? I mean, that part of this whole ecosystem, that software, is not a very complex thing to deploy and manage.
On this wallet, last question, was it your Christian talking? He was just talking.
Back here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Whoever was talking, please continue.
Oh, so now just really wrong. So, what would the approach you use for people financial institutions? Like partnership or like
yeah, it's just a vendor, it's just a vendor relationship. Some vendor out there sells a digital wallet software. There's only multiple of them, and where the bank just adopts it and deploys it on their site. Yeah, right.
And the reaction of the enterprise,
it was that's interesting. We'll get back to you, right? Most financial institutions. So I can only speak from personal experience. Most financial institutions that we've talked to say, we believe this is the future, we would love to pilot it, and then they do a pilot, and then it's kind of radio silence. So they're, banks tend to be, they have very strong flocking behavior. Someone has to go out and do the thing before everyone else rushes in and does it, but when that happens, the industry tends to flock in the direction. So we haven't seen any particular bank really lead the flock.
But again, it's, it's a regulatory situation. So in the U.S., the paperwork response units have massive increases in the number of people since 2002. But in some cases, 300-400%. I think it's increasing. So that's where a lot of their innovation is happening. Risk management. All the new requests. In Europe, on the other hand, the regulations that start coming up or every time before that. I need to be able to pull all my information out of your bank and move it to the next bank, and vice versa. Which is, I remember when that mandate is coming up.
Yeah, early 2018, I think it's the first rollout.
So following up just on what you're really doing, what I hope, which is speaking from your experience and your talk and what you hear. And I asked what might be relevant about wallets. So let's just spend another moment on that, because we love to build things at MIT. And I'm hoping that as people see the video, people in the room, consider your remarks, perhaps an idea will be spawned that can make a difference. So in that spirit, technical question and then speculation. With this software, what do you call it again?
This is just the payment handler and the credential handler. It's open source.
So the payment handler.
Okay,
thanks. And we'll make sure we share the links of it. Is the concept here that the public-private key in the software would be generated? Would it be this? Are you using the same approach as a Bitcoin or Ethereum wallet, or something different?
It's not a public-private key. So it depends. There's a bunch of it depends. So the software can be configured in a variety of different ways. Benefits, drawbacks to doing it in different ways. For payment instruments, like Bitcoin or Ethereum, you have to have a wallet that can do public-private key pair stuff, right? You can store it on the device. You can store it on the server. It has to exist. Hardware secure device. It has to exist somewhere. But that's just for Bitcoin payment instruments. For Visa and MasterCard, all you need is a number, no public-private key pair necessary. Right. So that's just for the payment stuff. For the identity stuff, you do need a private key of some kind, Bitcoin-based, RSA-based, something, digitally countersign the credential. And that can be stored in the same way that you do in Bitcoin stuff. Hardware secured device, on the server, on the client, in the browser.
Is that under the scope of this handling the credentials, the key gen and usage?
Yeah, and that's still being discussed
Okay.
in the standards.
Live question. Great. And then the speculation would be, if you could imagine, just have fun for a moment, stand like $20 time, like a kind of digital wallet that would really kill it as a great sort of open source, widely propagated tool that would be a service of great overall. What would be the basic component? Like, what do you want to build out from this demo to complete it? The reason I ask is I imagine you want keygen in there, general, and do you want it to connect your pivot to a blockchain address? Do you want other capabilities? So what's missing?
Well, I mean, it all depends on the bank, right? I mean, what does the bank want to do with this stuff? And there is no real clear, and they're fairly far behind their thinking. I mean, the banks are doing blockchain pilots, but there's no real focus on, we want to Bitcoin enable our customers to do Bitcoin payments on the web. We've never really heard that as this is something.
And they're not usually when the banks are talking about anything about the live blockchain, whatever. It's anything they're talking about, it's for the last.
Understood. And
did you ask for opportunities?
Yes, and it's in that spirit, not so much of where we are at this moment and how they're regarding it, but what if we did something before that we were here at MIT in the media lab and postulated, with, not hold you to not for your company or investors or anything else, just go think with us for a moment. If you completed something that was open source, that could be the sort of thing you might bite at under the right conditions, what would be missing? And then back to Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, at this point, I don't think there's much missing other than a pretty UI, right? So the user interface has to be nice. You have to be able to look at the past payments, past transactions. You have to be able to look at your credentials easily, but those are very easy. I don't want to hand wave over the user interface, but it's much easier there are many people in the world that can build a killer user interface for that. Versus the people that need to get the crypto and stuff working. It's a much smaller community. So it's a lot of product work at this point, right? A fancy UI, review transactions, look at all of your credentials. But that's really it. I mean, the back of the problem is broken at this point. Now it's just a matter of creating compelling visual wallets, creating compelling merchant sites.
Has to do with all the drop-off in the engagement that happens between the point where you go, I want to buy this product, and then you've actually committed to what
Shopping cart attrition.
So it's shopping cart attrition and just the cognitive weight of all the decisions. Oh, I have to remember my password at this site. Did I ever have a password? No, I didn't. Yeah. Then I have to fill in this information. Which address do I send it to, et cetera. But anything that sort of begins to remove or make it easier for the cognitive weight, that's also things like coupons. Like, did I receive a coupon from somebody that allowed me to have a discount on this? Wouldn't it be great if it just automatically showed up? Oh yeah, you have to have gotten a coupon 3 days ago. It would solve this for you. Or loyalty points. Having that automatically be generated. And then even going less engagement or easier engagement, if you were somebody was talking to you, we're talking about being able to pay 1 cent or whatever for the article, micropayments, even touching a button for 1%, and that 1 cent can get too much. What you actually want to kind of say is have it, act on my behalf for certain kinds of looking for certain threshold systems. Yeah. I have a budget of $10 for revenue using a month. And it'll give, this month it gave $2 to Atlantic. Next month it gave 3 cents to Atlantic. So
exactly.
So one thing I noticed is that when mentioning web payment and data credential systems, you mentioned a lot of centralized systems such as and how do you see those operating?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So a lot of the decentralized systems haven't stepped up to the plate yet, right? I mean, there are plenty of companies that are Bitcoin companies and, you know, and Ethereum companies. They could create payment handlers for this stuff, but they haven't today. The hope is that over the next year, that'll happen. But that's a largely unexplored space at this point, right? So here's the interesting challenge. How do we build on top of this? Like the substrate is there, right? It's beyond the experimental phase. These things are going to be ratified as international standards of payment stuff, especially in the next couple of probably by mid of next year. Like payment request and payment handler happens after that. We're hoping the credential stuff comes in shortly after that to be enabled in the browser. So 2.8 billion people have access to this stuff now, right? But from the payment stuff, we're just exchanging credit card information still with it. It has the capability of doing very interesting distributed payments, centralized payments, new payment networks, new
build on what?
the existing stuff. Like, you know, you just saw a demo. It's there. It's open source. It's going to become standard. So, you know, build something interesting on top of it, because credit cards on top of it, while yes, that's good. It's an increased user interface. We're going to help with shopping cart abandonment. There's a tremendous amount of potential that you can unlock there with new types of payment instruments, new types of payment networks. The same thing with the credential handler API, right? It exists. You saw it, you know, working back and forth. But what are the really interesting credentials that you could issue? Who's going to start issuing those credentials, right? So getting those organizations understanding that they can issue these things, and then helping them issue meaningful credentials to people, things that they use on a daily basis, is another challenge. There's not a lot of people, you know, focused on that kind of second tier thing at this point.
So you mentioned meaningful credentials, and that's something that's kind of interesting to me. We're looking at how LinkedIn does its attribution system, like basically, I'm not doing anything, but essentially when people work together, they will endorse each other. That's what it's an endorsement system. And what I've noticed is that the endorsement system is somewhat abused. How do you see this essentially working so that the signal to noise ratio actually plays out effectively? And what do you think are these challenges?
That's an excellent question. So I don't think that anyone can predict what's going to happen 2 or 3 years out from, you know, when there's uptake with the credential handler. The hope is that the signal to noise ratio will get better, but there is also, this stuff's open to abuse, right? What happens about people lying in their verifiable claims? And at that point, you know, institutions kind of step in and you know, you can trust some institutional statements more than you can, you know, personal statements. So getting an endorsement from your company, from a manager at your company, is usually viewed as better in some cases than getting a review from your peers, and vice versa. Sometimes a peer review is much better than a multinational company, you know, endorsement of what you can do. But I think it's an unsolved problem. How do you deal with reputation is one of those big unsolved problems.
What are some international credit issuer and who recognize their bodies that you see as being more amenable to change, digitizing what they do?
So I mean, that's a great question. When it comes down to like private organizations, everyone says they're interested. Many people run pilots, but I've seen very little transition to practice. And some of that's because the economic incentives aren't there, right? In some cases, it can hurt them. So I mean, you know, Estonia's pushing forward, but you know, because they're a government, they're being very safe about the way that they expand their services. They don't provide something unless they're very certain about the legal implications, economic implications, how it can be misused. They have guardrails in place for if something goes wrong, and it takes years to put those things in place. So I don't really know of any organization that would move very quickly over the next 3 months, let's say, or 6 months to adopt this stuff. But that's what the group needs help with, right? I mean, we need introductions to those sorts of organizations. So that's another challenge, if people know of organizations that are forward-looking, that they believe will not just do a pilot as an experiment, but they have a very strong economic incentive to digitize these credentials.
You might be looking at all countries.
Right. So Europe has a stronger, in general, because of GDPR and PSD2, have a stronger.
That's not people are thinking.
Oh, okay.
Ask more strong. What he knows.
Well, I'm from Mozambique.
Okay.
There's a good one in Kenya, there's Nigeria, and like, they kind of, by virtue of the fact that they have such a basic network for so long, now it's rolling a cellular network, and the ways in which they've had to come back together in the system.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of they've almost reflected on it. Yeah. So
I think one of the challenges there is that the technical community that's working on this stuff just doesn't have the connections, those technical connections. Like I've advised Gates Foundation on a variety of things. We work with their financial services for projects, but those and those are ongoing and they're doing good work, but those haven't resulted in direct connections between governments and
I'll also say there's an additional component in the standards world. There's a kind of whole around non-web mobile. So whether or not you're talking about a dumb phone or a smartphone app, there's a big lack of any kind of standard-wide organization or whatever that is helping people work together. So everybody kind of basically been working on space because it's often regulated. And maybe be careful about the word regulation. The competition isn't always fair in mobile space. And that kind of, I love the convenience of Apple. But pay is, not Google Pay. Google Pay, no. Apple Pay, yes. Or the third one or fourth one or whatever, and they're not incentivized to make those machines work. But when it works right.
I mean, I think the other challenge is to put these two things together in exciting ways. So this gets back to what Christopher said about this stuff really gets interesting at the intersection. So we've got, if you have stronger digital identity, digital credentialing, and you have, very expandable payment systems, when you put those two things together, you get a pretty powerful substrate that businesses and organizations can build on top of. So the other challenge is to figure out ways to put this stuff together into a larger ecosystem. Right?
Good idea. Consumer banking industry, and the experience is that they deal with this much. Legacy systems, whatever you know, occasionally. However, so that some of the entities that are creating their own apps, their own digital banks, they try to implement digital banking. I think that's the way it works. Because if you just go to the main bank, they don't know what to do. Eventually, yes, there's going to be adoption, and then everybody's going to this, but nobody wants to do the first move. So they try, they experiment. I think that's the way we can talk about it.
And therefore, they are not. We have very. They're not very good at putting it in practice.
And because even they're part of the strategy discussion, not even then.
Yeah.
So then, strategy for them to provide this.
They're almost they're sectioned away in this little tiny bubble,
Exactly.
and they have this magical world that we can never pierce the bubble to
Exactly.
enter there for real.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, in some cases, and this is the opinion is going to come off stronger than it actually is. But in some cases, some of those labs are there to just cover the banks, right? To prove that they're innovating without actually moving that innovation into the bank.
I've never heard the word innovating, like you're dripping with so much. So what we have so far is there's a challenge, everybody. So gauntlet thrown. Well, you know what we do next. So how do we, and perhaps also what and how do we build on these critical new foundations of standards that are in the pipeline? They're known, they're coming. There's, time to build. How about new payment instruments, new payment networks, trust networks perhaps, include payment and identity, new types of issuers and credentials. Are there opportunities with things that are people use daily, high volume, high frequency? What are another challenge, what types of organizations or groups would be most motivated and ready to adopt and adapt and kind of take forward and deploy this stuff? Maybe most of you don't know. Yeah. You got connections, or do you? Yeah. Maybe not, as we speak and as people observe this video and come forward. How do we put the identity and payments standardization and the standards-oriented common resource tools like the ones that we just demoed, how do we put them together into interesting combinations to compose new kinds of services and opportunities for business models? Good challenges. Time to get hacking, I reckon. So can I ask, how can people learn more about you and your work, and then also if they want to get involved or follow up on any of the things you've said?
So it depends on where you want to get involved in the whole process. There's a tremendous amount of experimentation that's happening right now in the Rebooting Web Trust community that Christopher Allen is leading. There is some work at IIW, but most of the really interesting stuff is Rebooting Web of Trust. So there's this pipeline, like 3-stage pipeline. Experimentation, it's mostly being led by Rebooting Web of Trust. Credentials and identity stuff happening there. Stage 2 is community groups, so W3C community groups. It's open to the public, anyone can join. W3C-CCG, the Credentials Community Group.github.io. We'll send that link out later, but that is where we sit down and start taking the experiments and put them into specification form, incubate them in the W3C, and then the third stage, which is where the verifiable claim stuff is, and is where the web payment stuff is, standardization, so actual ratification of an international standard. So you can participate at any one of those stages. You have to be a W3C member to participate in the very last stage, but the 2 stages before, anybody can. Show up, Rebooting Web of Trust. You write a position paper or a small paper on what you want to work on. You submit it. You show up and you do great work.
Or smart questions are just as useful as physical. I think you should do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then for the Credentials Community Group, we meet every week, Tuesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern. So anyone can join the call. Just dial in. And then the web payments, stuff, there are multiple meetings that happen. That's how you can join and help us.
And what's next? So you've got a couple of major birth events here. What's on the horizon? Is it the DID, something else?
Yeah, so the verifiable claims work is going forward and the payments work is going forward. There's fantastic work on distributed identifiers, DIDs, or decentralized identifiers. That's going on in Rebooting Web of Trust. We're prepping that work for standardization. There's quite a bit of work around DID methods, which is how do you implement these in various different ledgers. The Credential Handler API is currently kind of being formed. So even though you saw this demo, it's very much kind of in the early stages. It might change. Christopher, what other things do you think?
I think that we're approaching the point where developers use a lot of trust tools to secure the software, sign software, help deliver software that isn't corrupted. And we're sort of using pretty old technology for that, and we're giving some limits, so being able to start experimenting with some newer approaches to securing the software. it's a little, since we're in these early stages, getting developers familiar with these technologies or whatever will make it easier a year from now, or 2 years, or whatever, for them to start making it easier for regular people. Because it's not easy. Powerful, but it's not easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like I said, like UI, UX.
Yeah,
absolutely. Almost like you should be number one.
Yeah. I mean, I might even reverse it around. I think we have a really good sort of use case template, but we only have 2 use cases. And so
Where we get it? How can we fill it up?
Yeah, it's called the user engagement model. There are 2 examples at the Rebalancing Web Trust. The one that's finished, which is the refugee use case around identity. We did this time one around human rights advocacy of a programmer who wants to participate in human rights advocacy. But we love having this model, the 15-step model, can be used for payments, it can be used for a wide variety of digital interactions. And as engineers, we've got sometimes our heads in the bits. And we need to sometimes pop up at the kind of higher level and go, what is this actually going to do?
Yeah, there's a big legal, law policy implications work that needs to also happen here, right? I mean, these are kind of new instruments that the Estonian government has kind of figured out how to write the legislation and get it passed through the legislature and make it happen at a national level. But Europe's pretty far ahead, GDPR, PSD2. The U.S. is lagging far, far behind in that respect. And there are new uses for this, new ways of, where the law is kind of going to be tested in what these credentials
I'll give you a quick example, kind of a weird one. So, it's in the government's interest to make sure that, high expensive transactions or whatever aren't going to go to court too often, because we can't afford to have lots of fraud in the industry or whatever. So one of the things they do is they say you need to be a sophisticated investor to participate in various things. And they've got some different criteria of what those things are. But at the root of a sophisticated investor is that you're knowledgeable, that you know what you're doing and it's consensual. It's not necessarily that you've got $1 million to spend. You could be absolutely stupid with $1 million to spend. You should be doing some of these sort of more risky investments. What happens if you have a digital claim that proves that you've taken some courses on risk and all the different management things that might address and allow greater access to being able to participate in our economy. So that was the big objection of the Occupy movement. The only people who can participate in sort of the new economy things is the 1%. We want them to have broader participation, but we also don't want grannies to have their retirement management. So how do we balance that? We can start doing some interesting things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, I know that you've got planes to catch and business empires to build, and so thank you so much for taking the time to come by and to share and to educate and hopefully to form some connections and relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the wonderful discussion.
Here. And so if you want to come and hack on any of the things Manu said, come back to the Media Lab online or in person on October 30th and 31st, where it's going to be Identity and Payment Palooza at the MIT Legal Forum on AI and blockchain. Drummond Reed, a member of the Identifier tribe, will be one of the keynote speakers. You're always welcome back, as are you, Christopher. And I can tell you now, as I see this, I'm going to just steal some of your challenges and chuck them into the challenges and scenarios that I want to use to catalyze discussion.
Great.
So we'll make good things come from today.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Please come back early and often.
We will, definitely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.